Sometimes the most dangerous journeys aren't the ones covering miles, but the ones that unfold in the close confines of a car, next to someone who suddenly makes you feel things you absolutely shouldn't. My unease started the moment my son, Arif, cheerfully announced his best friend Kian would be escorting me on a week-long trip to care for my ailing sister. Practical, Arif called it. 7 days, just me and Kian. A man I barely knew beyond polite greetings, a man whose quiet confidence suddenly felt intensely present. Practical? Nothing about it felt practical. Have you ever been thrown into unexpected proximity with someone who throws your world off balance? It's a recipe for complication. Make sure you subscribe and hit that bell, because this practical arrangement went places I never anticipated. What's the most unexpected travel situation you found yourself in? Share below. Mom, it's just a week, Arif had chuckled, dismissing my hesitation. You worry too much. Kian travels constantly for work. He knows the ropes. It's just easier this way. And maybe it was. Traveling alone after years felt daunting. Kian was polite, responsible, Arif's trusted friend. So I nodded, pushing down the unnamed reluctance. The next morning, Kian arrived, punctual as ever. Leaning against his car, handsome in that effortlessly put-together way young men can be, he smiled warmly. Morning, Mrs. Sharma. Just Mira, I corrected automatically, the formality suddenly feeling awkward. He nodded, taking my luggage with an easy competence. As I slid into the passenger seat, I stole a glance. Dark hair, sharp gaze holding a hint of amusement, probably at my obvious discomfort. Why did I feel so flustered? The drive began in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable for long. To fill the quiet, I mumbled something about hoping this wasn't a hassle. Not at all, Kian replied smoothly. Arif asked and I was happy to help. Besides, he added with a slight smirk, I needed a break myself. From what? Work mostly. And maybe life, he admitted, a quiet weight beneath the polished surface I recognized all too well. And just like that, conversation flowed. Books, music, travel. He was surprisingly engaging, easy to talk to. I found myself laughing, genuinely laughing, more than I had in months. This ease, this unexpected connection with someone practically a stranger, began to chip away at my initial unease, replacing it with something far more complicated. Isn't it strange how connection can spark in the most unexpected circumstances? Like this video, if you know that feeling of surprise. By the time we reached our first overnight stop, a quiet town nestled in rolling hills, the tension had morphed. Not familiarity exactly, but awareness. At the hotel, Kian handled check-in efficiently. The receptionist handed us keys to adjacent rooms. The simple act felt oddly intimate. Long drive, Kian commented in the elevator. You must be exhausted. I nodded, grateful for the neutral topic. At his door he turned. If you need anything, just knock. Thanks, I replied, acutely aware of the shift in the air between us, subtle but undeniable. Closing my own door, I leaned against it, exhaling slowly. This was just a trip. Practical. Necessary. But a quiet whisper inside me, hinting at something new, something unspoken, refused to be silenced. The following days developed their own rhythm. Long drives, quiet evenings. But restlessness replaced the exhaustion I'd expected. It wasn't the journey, it was Kian. Observing him in close proximity was revealing. The way he tapped his fingers on the wheel when thinking. The slight dip in his voice discussing something passionate. The unconscious, almost protective way he'd position himself between me and the street traffic when we walked. Small things. Noticed things. Why was I noticing them? One crisp evening in a quiet hill town, he suggested a walk. We strolled side by side through golden streetlights, the silence comfortable yet charged. You seem more relaxed than when we left, Kian observed. Maybe I needed this more than I thought, I admitted. Time to just breathe. He glanced at me, something unreadable in his eyes. I get that. At a small tea shop overlooking a valley, we sat in a quiet corner. What's the first place you traveled alone? He asked unexpectedly. Paris, I smiled faintly. Early 20s. Before everything. And? He prompted gently. It felt, I hesitated, searching for the words, like I belonged to myself. For the first time. He studied me. I think everyone deserves that feeling. His words landed softly but with profound weight. I looked away, that dangerous flutter returning. Stop this, Mira. He was younger. Arv's friend. It was wrong. But attraction rarely listens to reason. That pull towards someone you know you shouldn't want. It's a powerful force. Have you ever felt it? Complicates everything. Walking back, the careful distance I'd tried to maintain felt paper thin. Inside the small elevator, his presence was a warm magnetic force. At my door, I fumbled slightly with the key. Thank you, Kian. For today. He smiled, a new softness in his gaze. Anytime, Mira. Neither of us moved for a beat. The quiet hallway, the unspoken awareness. Something had shifted irrevocably. Mira. His voice was low, hesitant. I didn't turn. Couldn't. Afraid of what I'd see. Afraid of what I might do. I slipped inside my room, closing the door. The air inside suddenly feeling thick, charged. And a treacherous part of me didn't want it to fade. This is where the boundaries start to blur beyond repair. If you're feeling the tension, make sure you subscribe because the point of no return is approaching. Sleep was elusive. Kian's voice, his look, the feeling between us replayed endlessly. When I saw him waiting in the lobby the next morning, quiet smile in place, I knew yesterday wasn't an anomaly. The thread hadn't broken. It had tightened. The drive that day was quieter, the silence heavy with unspoken thoughts. A sudden downpour forced us to stop at a rustic roadside inn. Inside, near a crackling fireplace, the air thick with the scent of rain and coffee, the proximity felt both cozy and suffocating. You're quiet today, he finally said, his gaze steady. I wrapped my hands around my warm teacup. I don't know what to do with this, I confessed, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. With what? He asked gently. I met his eyes, abandoning pretense. With the way I feel. The admission hung between us, stark and irreversible. He didn't flinch. Then don't fight it, Mira. Kian, this isn't wrong, he interrupted softly. Or just unexpected. I swallowed hard. My whole life was built on predictable lines, roles I understood. This was uncharted, dangerous territory. Every instinct screamed for retreat. But then he reached across the small table, his fingers brushing mine. The briefest touch. It shattered my remaining defenses. I didn't pull away. The rain drummed against the windows, sealing us in that moment of quiet surrender. That single touch that changes everything. It's powerful, isn't it? Like this video if you felt the impact of that moment. That evening, the innkeeper showed us to adjacent rooms. Thin walls, dim hallway. At my door, heart pounding, I hesitated. Kian stopped beside me. If you ask me to walk away right now, Mira, I will. His voice was low, serious. I inhaled sharply, torn. Logic warred with the undeniable pull. I thought of my life back home, the routine, the quiet loneliness. Then I thought of Kian, of feeling seen. I reached for my door handle, pushed it open. Then I turned back, looked at him, held his gaze. No words were needed. He understood. A moment later, the soft click of his own door opening, then closing, was followed by a gentle knock on mine. He stepped inside, closing my door behind him, shutting out the world, sealing our choice. I woke to the soft patter of rain. The world outside washed clean. But inside, clarity was replaced by the heavy weight of reality. Kian slept beside me, his breathing even, his face peaceful. Seeing him like this, young and unguarded, intensified the storm inside me. What had I done? The night had been a blur of surrendered control, an inevitable culmination of the tension that had simmered between us. No hesitation, just the raw honesty of mutual desire finally acknowledged. And now came the reckoning. Quietly, carefully, I slipped out of bed, dressing with trembling fingers. Every part of me ached. Not just physically, but with the deep, hollow knowledge that this beautiful, stolen moment couldn't last. It was transient, dangerous. A foolish hope flickered. Maybe this could be something real? But looking at him, asleep, belonging to a different life, Arv's life, in a way, I knew the truth. This wasn't a beginning. It was a detour. A beautiful, terrifying deviation from the path I had to return to. I reached the door, needing escape, needing normalcy. Mira. His voice, thick with sleep, stopped me cold. I froze. He pushed himself up on an elbow, drowsiness fading from his eyes, replaced by that quiet, intense understanding. You're leaving. Statement, not a question. I swallowed hard. I have to. He didn't argue, didn't plead. Just nodded slowly, accepting the impossible reality. I won't regret this, he said softly. Not for a second. I closed my eyes briefly. Neither would I, not the feeling of being alive again. But regret wasn't the issue. Everything else was. My life, my son, the trust Kian unknowingly held. I stepped into the cool, dim hallway, the door clicking softly behind me, severing the moment. The drive back was steeped in a heavy, understanding silence. We didn't need words. When we reached my house, the familiar sight felt alien. I hesitated before getting out. Kian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Mira, he said finally, his voice low, strained. I turned to him. If I asked you to stay in this moment, just a little longer, would you? The question hung there, fragile, loaded, impossibly tempting. A wave of longing washed over me. Yes, but the life waiting beyond the car door. The responsibilities, the face of my son. I can't, I whispered, the truth tasting like ashes. I reached out, my fingers brushing his knuckles in a touch that was both goodbye and a painful acknowledgement of what could never be. Then I got out, walked towards my front door, towards my reality, and didn't look back. I knew he was watching. And maybe, just maybe, in another lifetime under different stars I would have turned around. But in this life, the weight of shit felt heavier than the memory of what if. Can a connection forged in circumstance and forbidden feelings ever truly be forgotten, even if not pursued? What mark does a choice like Myra's leave? Share your deepest thoughts below. Hit like one last time if you felt the emotional weight of this journey. And please subscribe for more complex stories. Maybe the echo of that brief connection, that feeling of being truly seen, would be enough. Or maybe it would just be a constant, quiet ache. Maybe,